The Where Our Minds Wander podcast may contain sensitive content and explicit language. Listener discretion is advised. Greetings, fellow wanderers, to the places our minds wander.
The house at the end of the dirt road, where disembodied voices whisper and strange sounds make the living shiver.
Where shadows lurk at the edge of the woods, just outside your back door. And mysterious lights speed beyond reason across the clear night sky.
Odd events throughout time that lead you down the rabbit hole.
I'm Wes.
And I'm Beth.
And this is Where Our Minds Wander. Hello and welcome to Where Our Minds Wander, all you fellow wanderers. Thank you for joining Beth and I.
Hello, everybody.
Well, if you haven't already, go ahead and leave us a comment on your favorite listening platform and a 5-star review. We'd greatly appreciate it. And tonight, we're not really going to do a lot of bullshitting before we get into our episode because we've got a major thunderstorm rolling into the area, and I want to go out and play in it.
Which means I'll get dragged along with you to go outside and play in it. I'm okay if I'm inside the car with the rubber tires and we're moving.
Well, yeah. You don't really have much to worry about.
Right.
You know, I'm doing all the driving.
Well, that's true.
But I do love a good storm.
Yes, you do. It's one of the things I love about you.
There's nothing like cruising around the North Country, around the lake, with a good thunderstorm rolling in, where you can barely see anything because the rain's pounding down. The winds are just blowing the waves up to the shore. It's an incredible feeling.
It sounds like a great time, honey.
It is in my book. You know I live for storms.
I know you do.
Well, with that said, Beth's going to start us off as usual, and she's got a pretty good story for you all tonight.
I do. We haven't covered an unusual place in quite a while, so hopefully this is a treat for everybody. So, the Bradley Danvers luxury apartments, about 34 miles outside of Boston, Massachusetts, are pretty nice if you like the luxury apartment vibe. The massive compound includes a state-of-the-art gym, an indoor basketball court, a lounge complete with pool table, and an outdoor swimming pool that looks like it belongs at a luxury resort. The apartments are totally modern, clean lines, chrome fixtures, and an open, sunny atmosphere. The rent, I guess, is pretty reasonable for the area, running between $2,500 and $4,000 a month, depending on how many bedrooms the unit has. Currently, there are 21 open apartments for rent. But take one look at the main building at Bradley Danvers, the oldest, still existing, most original building on the site, and you can't help but pause. I mean, this building is Gothic beyond belief, with its spires and tower and pointy triangular roofline. It's obviously from the 1800s, and it was once obviously a building designed for something very, very different than luxury apartments, especially if you come across the 770 bodies buried in the 2 nearby cemeteries, many of which don't have anything but a number to mark their final resting places. The truth is, the Bradley Danvers apartment complex was once the site of an asylum that was so notorious, horror writer H.P. Lovecraft used it as the inspiration for his Arkham Sanitarium. And if that sounds a little familiar, Arkham, that is, Well, that's because DC Comics went on to create Arkham Asylum as the home for many of the Batman villains. And the interactive board game Mansions of Madness has an entire expansion based on Arkham, which essentially means it's really based on the Danvers State Hospital, which was formerly known as the State Lunatic Asylum at Danvers. So, Bradley Danvers Luxury Apartments sits on the former site of a notorious asylum, which, to this day, is considered one of the most haunted sites in the entire state of Massachusetts. According to allthat'sinteresting.com, the land that Danvers State Hospital was built on once belonged to John Hathorne, the notorious judge who presided over the Salem witch trials just 16 miles away. Hawthorne, along with Judge Jonathan Corwin, badgered witnesses and tortured the accused until they confessed. He was responsible for 20 witchcraft-related executions in 1692. And if his surname sounds vaguely familiar, that could be because his great-great-grandson, author Nathaniel Hawthorne, added a W into his last name to distance himself from his ancestors' legacy. According to Atlas Obscura, the State Lunatic Asylum at Danvers, which later became the Danvers State Hospital, opened in 1878 after 4 years of construction. The classically Gothic-looking building was designed by architect Nathaniel Jeremiah Bradley and cost $1.5 million to build, and that's 1878 money. Originally, the hospital had 2 main buildings, each with central administration in the center and 4 wings branching off of each side. There was a 3rd building connected to the main buildings by an elaborate tunnel system that housed the kitchen, laundry, chapel, and all of the dormitories. Men and women were separated into different wings, and the most hostile patients were kept in the outermost wards. The massive complex was meant to house 500 patients, with additional space in the attic that could accommodate 1,000 more. The asylum was meant to be completely self-sufficient, and like many of the infamous asylums from that time period, it operated under the Kirkbride Plan. Now, we've talked about the Kirkbride Plan before, but in a nutshell, psychiatrist Thomas Kirkbride developed the idea that people suffering from mental health issues needed lots of sunlight, green grass, and fresh air. So, when I said earlier that each of Danvers' main buildings had 4 wings on each side, they did that so that every single room had access to sunlight. So, picture a main building with 1 wing off the side, then another wing attached to the end of that, but slightly recessed behind it. Each of the total 16 wings was a separate ward that had its own parlor, bathroom, and infirmary. There were speaking tubes and dumbwaiters in each wing for staff to use to communicate with the other floors. The superintendent was meant to live on site with his family. Each patient's room was meant to have 12-foot-high ceilings to promote air circulation. Adhering to the Kirkbride Plan also meant manicured lawns and ornamental as well as practical gardens, and outdoor exercise spaces. For almost 6 decades, the State Lunatic Asylum at Danvers was highly successful. there were over 40 outbuildings in addition to the 3 main buildings, and over 9,500 patients were successfully treated by 125 staff members by the year 1900. Of the 40 outbuildings, some were separate halls for tuberculosis patients. But that, according to allthat'sinteresting.com, may have been its ironic downfall. The hospital's reputation was so good that families were dropping off their loved ones in droves. The initial patient count of 450, which it stayed pretty close to throughout all those years prior to that, swelled to 2,000 patients. By the late 1930s and 40s, the hospital now housed over 2,000. With so little room and a shortage of staff, many patients were kept in the basement of the building, and treatments were not exactly humane, including the use of straitjackets. Despite begging the state for more money to construct more buildings and hire additional staff, Danvers State Hospital's pleas went unanswered. It was common for visitors to the hospital to come face to face with fully naked patients wandering the halls. Basic hygiene was ignored, and many patients were not bathed on any sort of regular schedule. Electric shock therapy was introduced as a way to keep patients under control. If they refused treatment, they were often put in straitjackets. By 1939, even the threat of shock therapy was wearing thin as a control method, with the over 2,360 patients. And Danvers introduced something else entirely: prefrontal lobotomies. Danvers State Hospital was actually known as the birthplace of the prefrontal lobotomy, mostly because so many of them were performed there. It's noted by allthat'sinteresting.com that 278 patients at Danvers died the same year that prefrontal lobotomies were introduced there. Instead of witnessing naked patients wandering the halls, visitors now reported lobotomy patients wandering the halls instead, seemingly in a drugged-like state, stopping only to stare at the walls for long periods of time. The Kirkbride plan, which had been so successful, had been thoroughly thrown out the window. Most of the patients weren't even allowed to leave the building anymore. The electric shock therapy and the lobotomies were used to keep the crowds under control, which sparked more than just a little bit of controversy. During the 1960s, as a result of increased emphasis on alternative methods of treatment, community-based mental health care, and deinstitutionalization, the population started to decrease. However, the state of Massachusetts had denied requests to Danvers for more funding, and in 1969 they cut even more, and portions of the hospital were forced to shut down. This wasn't a bad thing by any means, but it's ironic, to me at least, that the state was all up in arms about how these patients were being treated after they'd systematically refused to give them any more financial help for decades. However, the hospital itself remained open until 1992, continuing to house mental health patients. Now, I wasn't going to bring up the urban legend about the 115 missing teenage patients, but I actually think it's probably better to set the record straight rather than not bring it up at all. At some point after the invention of the internet, rumors started flying around about 115 missing teenage patients from Danvers during a 3-month period during the 1980s. These internet rumors say things like a doctor went missing too, and that none of the teenagers were ever found. Some go so far as to say that when the families asked about their missing children, they were only told that their child, quote, had been assigned to a new doctor, end quote. Well, the truth is, there were never any missing teenagers. It's not true. It's just an urban legend. And I promise, despite how many websites on the internet proclaim that it is true, it's not true. By 2005, the former asylum had sat abandoned for almost 10 years. The Danvers State Hospital official website offers a timeline chronicles page that lists all of the police and fire calls to the hospital through this decade, where teenagers and vandals flocked to the site. At this point, ghost hunters, both amateur and professional, were also flocking there. Those without permission were arrested for trespassing. In 2005, the property was sold to Avalon Bay Communities, who planned to turn the former asylum into luxury apartments. Local historians tried to stop the demolition to protect the former asylum as a historic landmark, but they lost in court. The original main building was saved only because it was already registered as a National Historic Landmark. On April 7, 2007, a massive fire broke out. The Danvers State Hospital website says the following, quote, "A 4-alarm fire at the former Danvers State Hospital destroyed 7 buildings and shut Route 1 down temporarily early this morning. The buildings, currently undergoing renovations, were empty. The facility is being renovated into apartment buildings and condominiums. State police also briefly evacuated 20 people living in neighboring already completed buildings as a precaution. 6 firefighters were treated for minor injuries. The fire, which began around 2 a.m., took several hours to bring under control. Avalon Bay Communities Incorporated is handling the renovations. The plan is to build 433 luxury rental units and 64 condominiums on the site's 77 acres, the Globe reported in February. The project is also to include amenities like an indoor sports court and a cyber cafe, a far cry from the building's dreary past. The hospital, abandoned since 1992 in response to accusations of overcrowding, abuse, and neglect, was primarily used to treat spiritual maladies. After being closed, the hospital quickly became a hotspot for thrill-seeking ghost hunters who believed the grounds to be filled with troubled spirits. The high level of curiosity and trespassing forced the state to employ 24-hour security guards for a time. The 2001 film Session 9, about an asbestos cleaning crew working in an abandoned mental hospital with a suspect past, was filmed there. End quote. The fire, by the way, was so massive that it could be seen from Boston, 30-something miles away. Richard Trask of the Danvers Archival Center wrote this about the state's failure to preserve the campus. He said, quote, "The failure to protect and adaptively reuse this grand exterior is a monumental blot in the annals of Massachusetts preservation. what might have been a dignified transformation of a magnificent structure, which was originally built to serve the best intentions, but at times lost its way through human frailty, now is a mere ghost image of itself, and we and our progeny are the losers." End quote. The Avalon Bay Communities Company has installed 3 plaques on the grounds that lists the names of the people buried in the Danvers State Hospital Cemetery. They've also agreed to maintain the cemeteries themselves. It's interesting, though, that the National Historic Landmark sign in front of the original building says the following. Originally known as Hathorn Hill, a 257-foot glacial drumlin that was the home of famous Salem witch judge John Hathorn, the land became home of the Dodge Farm in the 1800s. However, its time as a farm was short-lived, when the Commonwealth of Massachusetts allocated funds to build the Danvers State Hospital in 1874. The architect Nathaniel Bradley, for whom the community is now named, can be credited with over 500 architectural projects around Boston and the surrounding area. He designed the Gothic-style Kirkbride building at a time when much of the country was still recovering with the financial strain of the Civil War. The Kirkbride building was based on the design of physician Thomas Kirkbride, who believed that patients needed access to natural light and an abundant view of natural landscapes in order to heal. Today, it is a beautifully restored apartment community that provides high-end homes to people moving in and moving to the surrounding community. The original design has been maintained as a nod to the area's rich history and original intention for natural beauty. End quote. So, at first, I had a lot of issues with that sign because, as far as I could tell, all they were saying about the building where these luxury apartments were was that, it was once where Hathorn lived, and then all this stuff about the architect that built the building, but not really saying anything about the people who lived there. And then to say it was built with the intentions of natural light and beauty, and this is what you get now. I don't know, it made me mad. But, to be fair, after doing some digging, I did discover that the Bradley Danvers complex also has a Danvers State Hospital Memorial Plaza that contains 4 very large panels that detail the history of the site. So, at least they are doing their best to commemorate and honor the history of the building. And I'm sure everyone who lives there is fully aware that they are living on the site of a former asylum. So, I had mentioned at the beginning of my story that the former site of the Danvers State Hospital is considered one of the most haunted spots in the entire state. And yet, actual first-person accounts of any ghostly sightings don't seem to exist online. Current residents of the luxury apartments certainly aren't sharing any paranormal experiences. And all of the websites that I found gave pages of history and then just one vague sentence about the alleged hauntings, most commonly that people see shadow people, but 0 details. But here's what I could find, and again, it's quite vague, but here's what I could find. While the hospital buildings were still standing abandoned, ghost hunters claimed to hear voices calling for help, as well as disembodied wails. Security guards patrolling the property during the height of the vandalism decade also claim to have heard disembodied screams and the sound of heavy metal doors slamming shut. And lastly, apparitions and shadow figures have been seen darting between the trees on Hathorn Hill and peering out of the asylum's windows.
That's strange that there's no mention of hauntings of any kind.
It was impossible to find anything.
I wonder if they put a gag order on their workers.
And the people that live there, well, they can't do that. They can't do that.
But the people that they employ, perhaps they could.
Yeah.
I don't know.
Yeah.
Because you would think during the construction of these apartments, workers would have had experiences.
Right. Although most of it was burnt down in the fire. Well, they demolished a lot of it too, but...
Right, but it's still the grounds that it was built on.
Right.
Very strange.
I know.
Makes no sense to me.
And the whole time I was researching it and thinking about it, I was like, would I want to live in an apartment, even if it's not in the main original building, but would I want to live in an apartment on the site of a former asylum? And I don't think I would.
Yeah, I don't know. That's something you'd really have to think deeply about. I know I wouldn't want to live in a luxury apartment. I don't want all that LED lighting and the openness of it all.
Mm-hmm.
I like dark rooms with lamplight.
Right. Yeah, that's just not our style.
No, it's not.
No. But rent-wise, I mean, some of the units, one bedroom, $2,500 a month, that's pretty comparable to apartments around here. And
it's pretty cheap.
We are not comparable to Boston in any way, shape, or form.
No, it's odd.
Yeah. Yeah.
Well,
but anyway.
Maybe that speaks volumes all to itself.
Oh, maybe. I don't know. But definitely an unusual place to live, which is why I thought it was worth talking about.
Yeah, it'd be worth taking a peek at.
Yeah.
In person.
Yeah, sure.
All right. We'll be back right after this. Who'da thunk it? Hey, did you know? In 1814, London's Horseshoe Brewery's 22-foot-tall wooden vat of fermenting porter burst, causing chain reactions and destroying several large beer barrels. The beer subsequently flooded the nearby slum and killed 8 people. Several people also reportedly died from alcohol poisoning as a result of drinking the flooded liquor. Who'da thunk it? All right, we have returned from the break. And for my story tonight, I'm going to tell all you fellow wanderers about the Three Chimneys Inn and Tavern. In Durham, New Hampshire, there is a colonial-era house called the Three Chimneys Inn and Tavern. It's a popular venue for weddings and parties, since it's situated along the Oyster River and has been there since 1649, when New Hampshire was still a British colony. It's a charming house, with its pale yellow exterior, white columns, and single perfectly centered chimney. Now, the first question you might ask is, why is it called the Three Chimneys when it only has one? But before you can wonder any further, a young girl dressed in colonial-era clothes darts out from the side of the house. You watch her for a few seconds, as she seems to be playing a game all by herself, and no other costume adults or kids seem to be around. The little girl wanders out of sight around the back of the house, and the moment is broken. Once inside, you ask about the three-chimney thing. The house is actually much larger than it looks from the front, and the other 2 chimneys aren't visible straight on. And then you ask about the charming little girl you saw playing outside. Oh, that's Hannah, someone tells you. She was the original owner's daughter. She drowned in the Oyster River as a child. Yes, you've probably guessed it. The little girl is a ghost. Her spirit is said to haunt the Three Chimneys Inn for over 300 years now. And towards the end of my story, I'll get into all the encounters with her that I could find. But after doing a little research, I don't think she could possibly be the little girl everyone claims that she is, the first owner's daughter, Hannah Hill. So, with that said, who could she possibly be? Well, to figure it out, we have to take a look at the history of the house. In 1643, Valentine Hill received a land grant that included the falls of the Oyster River in what is now known as Durham. 6 years later, Hill and his business partner got permission to build a sawmill. The official Three Chimneys Inn website states that, quote, "The first owner was Valentine Hill, New England's leading 17th century entrepreneur." Stackpole's history says that, on the 29th day of the 9th month, 1649, Valentine Hill and Thomas Beard were granted the fall of Oyster River to set up a sawmill with accommodations of timber for the mill. On the 14th of the 5th month, 1651, the town granted to Valentine Hill 500 acres for a farm adjacent to his mills at Oyster River. The tract embraced the greater part of the site of the present village of Durham. Hill's holdings were extensive, including a sawmill, a grist mill, and water rights at the falls, directly across from what is now Durham Town Landing Park. Here Hill employed 7 Scots, and among other industries, lumber was milled for use in the shipbuilding industry. So some of the men who worked on Hill's farm and at the 2 mills were Scottish prisoners who were captured by the British after the Battle of Dunbar in 1650 and sent to the colonies as indentured servants. Over time, his land increased to 500 acres, including good farmland and permission to build a second sawmill on the banks of the Lamprey River. Hill had married his first wife, Frances, and by 1646, they had 6 children: Hannah, John, who died in infancy, Elizabeth, who died in infancy, twins Joseph and Benjamin, who both died in infancy, and then another Joseph, who also died in infancy. Frances herself passed away in 1646.
That's incredible. They have 6 children and 5 of them die as babies.
Well, that happened a lot back then.
It did happen a lot, but that just seems statistically like it was very high for their family.
Yeah, I feel for them. Of the 6 children, Hannah is the only one who lived to adulthood. And we know this because she got married in Boston in 1659. Her husband was Antipas Boyce, a prominent 17th century Boston merchant and landowner who was one of the original patent partners of the Kennebec Purchase in Maine. 1 year after the death of his first wife, Valentine Hill married a woman named Mary Eaton. Mary just happened to be the daughter of New Hampshire's governor. Together, they had 5 children: John, Samuel, Mary, Elizabeth, and Nathaniel. And as far as I can tell, all 5 children survived into adulthood. In 1649, Valentine Hill began construction on his house, that is now the Three Chimneys Inn, although initially it only had a basement and 1 story above that. All of the building supplies were ferried up the Oyster River by gondola, a type of Revolutionary War-era boat. According to the official Three Chimneys Inn website, the house survived some major events, including the 1694 raid on Oyster River. In a nutshell, during that time, the French were concerned about a peace treaty between the English and the Wabanaki nation, and they were afraid that the treaty would end their lucrative fur trade. So on July 18, 1694, the French military and about 250 Abenaki warriors launched a surprise attack on Durham. Approximately 100 settlers were killed or captured. Numerous homes were burnt to the ground, and 5 of the fortified garrison houses were destroyed. In 1699, with the raid still fresh in his mind, Valentine's youngest son, Nathaniel Hill, added 2 more stories to the house and equipped every window with shutters that could be closed over the windows during any sort of attack. By the 1700s, the house had passed on to the Woodman family, who were related to the Hills by marriage. During the Revolutionary War, the house was used as a secret storage area for munitions that were stolen from the British Army. In the 1800s, the house was purchased by George Frost. Frost hired an architect named Jacob Odell to remodel the property. Odell, by the way, is buried in the cemetery next to the inn. Odell added Federal-style trim to the interior of the house and changed the slope of the roof. He also dressed up the barn by adding Italianate-style eaves and a cupola. There's a special note in the Three Chimneys Inn website that there are 2 wells on the property. One of them is 12 feet wide and 40 feet deep. However, both of these wells were completely covered over in 1912 during a typhoid pandemic. The Frost sisters, daughters of George Frost, lived in the house for many years and added beautiful gardens. Then in the early 1900s, more descendants of the Frost family took over the property. James and Margaret Pepperell Frost Sawyer added extensive formal gardens, a stone wall, a swimming pool, and a tennis court. But eventually the house was passed from owner to owner and essentially fell into ruin. In 1997, the Sagamore Hill Company purchased the property and did extensive renovation and repair, and the house has been the Three Chimneys Inn ever since. As the oldest standing house in Durham and one of the oldest in all of New Hampshire, the Three Chimneys Inn is incredibly important from a historical standpoint. But it's also said to be haunted by Little Hannah Hill. Now, if you remember from earlier, I had mentioned that Hannah Hill was the only child of Valentine and Frances Hill, who lived into adulthood. She was married at the age of 20 and had a son in 1661. It's assumed she spent most of her time in Boston, and presumably also in Maine. So, how can the little girl ghost, who everyone says drowned in the Oyster River as a child, be Hannah? Well, there isn't any historical evidence that I could find that says anything about a child drowning in the river. But with that said, did Hannah actually drown there as an adult? Well, there isn't any historical record of that either. At least none that I could find. In fact, searching for anything about Hannah Hill after her marriage was pretty frustrating. There just doesn't seem to be any record of her after that. However, there's no denying that a little girl haunts the Three Chimneys Inn, and that she's been seen as far back as the 1700s. According to HauntedHovel.com, townsfolk claim to see the ghostly figure of a little girl wandering near the Oyster River and around the house. But in more recent years, the ghost called Hannah makes her presence known in all kinds of ways. Imagine being alone in one of the inn's rooms and hearing the deadbolt lock, or feeling something gently touching your hair. Innkeeper Karen Meyer has claimed that one night she and a staff member watched a glass lift off a table and fall onto the floor. Perhaps Hannah simply wanted to move the glass somewhere else, since one of the major activities attributed to her is the movement of all kinds of objects, especially silverware and furniture. In a 2015 Foster's article, Karen Meyer, who had worked there for 12 years by that point, said, quote, "Things happen that are tough to explain, but nothing evil. Silverware will go missing and then show back up. We've had doors lock themselves." Meyer also said, quote, "We have an awful lot of people say that furniture is moving around in rooms above them when there wasn't any guest up there. Things like that are hard to explain." Hannah also apparently dislikes technology a great deal. There's one story about a time when a printer in the house kept spewing out printed pages and wouldn't stop. The employee turned the computer off and unplugged the printer, and it continued to print pages for almost 20 minutes.
What did the pages say?
Well, I don't know, but I'd imagine that if they said anything interesting, it would be part of the story.
Right. You would think if they said, "My name is Hannah," or "Get the heck out of my house," or whatever.
I know, and what I find funny is that, isn't that something that you would include in the story? Even if it was gibberish, you'd say, well, it was all gibberish, but it did continue to print for 20 minutes.
20 minutes, that's a long time.
I mean, maybe there was something that could be deciphered out of it. Who knows?
Yeah.
But that's what happens, when researching. There's these like, oh, this is really cool. This is going to be something good. And then, boop, nothing.
Yeah.
There's also flickering lights, of course. But another creepy tale involves a calculator running the numbers backwards. It's pretty funny because we all did that in high school.
6006? Or was it 9009? It would have to be 90095. You can't remember either.
I don't. I remember hell.
Oh.
4177.
Oh, okay. I was talking about boobs. I think it's 9. I don't know. My brain doesn't work that way.
I don't think I ever did boobs on the calculator. Why didn't I do boobs on the calculator?
I don't know.
What the hell was wrong with me?
I don't know. We'll have to figure it out later. We'll giggle together.
Okay. Innkeeper Karen Meyer believes that Hannah is just one of many spirits who haunt the inn, including the ghost of an older woman. She shared a story about a guest who claimed she heard an old woman whispering something in her ear. But by far, the most intriguing stories of the Three Chimneys Inn hauntings comes from a 2016 TNHdigital.com article. They mentioned in the article that one employee who was asleep for the night woke up to the sound of someone walking around in the parlor. She hopped out of bed quickly, went to investigate, and like something out of The Sixth Sense, she found every drawer and cabinet in the parlor open exactly 1 inch.
It's kind of creepy.
That is. Does the ghost have a measuring tape?
Well, I'm thinking, how quickly could a guest have gotten into the parlor and gotten back out before she got in the parlor?
I don't know. It's probably not likely.
Probably not.
As further evidence for the article, an employee at the inn named Alyssa LeClaire, who was also a journalism major at UNH, showed the author some video footage she had taken one day. Early one morning, the employees heard someone walking around in the dining room, so LeClaire grabbed her phone and started recording. As the group entered the dining room, they discovered muddy footprints, but barefooted footprints, all across the dining room floor. Some seemed to stop at the edge of a rug and then start up again on the other side, but the rug itself was clean. When they lifted the edge of the rug up, the footprints continued on the floor as if the rug wasn't even there.
Well, that's odd.
That's creepy as all hell.
Yeah, you wouldn't expect them to continue under the rug like it didn't exist.
And I would love to see footage of that.
I know.
Because if it's actually out there, then that seems like a real haunting to me.
Yes.
That would creep the shit out of me.
I know.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wet, muddy footprints. Ugh.
I know. Which kind of further solidifies the idea that somebody drowned in the river.
That it does. So, who really is the female spirit anyways? Is it Hannah Hill haunting the house at various stages of her life as 3 separate entities? Or are there many spirits at the Three Chimney Inn?
I don't know. We've heard about that before, though, haven't we? Have we heard that before about a spirit? We've heard about people haunting places when they're not actually deceased.
Right. But I don't think I've ever really thought too much about it. But of course I did, because I wrote it here because it was an epiphany that I had. You know what I mean? What's the chances that you hunt someone when you're a little child, then middle-aged, and then at the end of your life?
All at the same time.
All at the same time. It's overlapping time.
I feel I'm having deja vu. I feel like we have had this conversation before because we talked about the entities running into each other or knowing that they were existing together.
Maybe you foresaw the future of us sitting here having this conversation.
Maybe people who listen to us from the beginning and have better memories than us will be able to tell us if we've talked about it before. I don't recall. No. That's interesting, though, if a person's spirit can divide into 3 different, or if it's dimensions, it would be in 3 different dimensions.
Overlapping?
Yeah.
But then they would look different, probably, in some sort of way.
Right.
So that
but
could be, but maybe not.
She didn't really drown in the river, though. She lived to be an adult.
Well, perhaps being a ghost in this place, she's heard this story so many times that now she also believes that as a little girl, perhaps she drowned in the river.
Maybe.
I don't know.
I know. It's interesting.
I mean, I'm still going back to the part that I thought this was a new idea that I had, and now I don't know if it's something I talked about before or if it's actually something I foresaw in the future.
You're currently existing in multiple dimensions at the same time, right in this moment, right now?
I could be.
Yeah.
But if that's the case, I want to go to the dimension where I don't have this freaking kidney stone anymore.
I was going to say maybe it's just, senility, but maybe that's all senility is people living in several dimensions at the same time.
Or perhaps it's something that you talked about and I just toned you out and subconsciously it stayed there and it came out when I was writing my story.
Well, that could be true too.
It could be.
You never know.
Mm-hmm.
Hey, you said roof. Remember last week we had a discussion about roof versus roof?
Right.
You said roof.
Right.
Yeah.
Roofs are in houses.
Yeah.
Dogs say roof.
Roofs come out of dogs. I think the heat is getting to us.
Well, it is supposed to get up to 106.
Yes. And we filmed, oh my gosh. We recorded the first half of our episode last night and we cut it short because we thought we were going to have a major thunderstorm. And it turned out to be nothing.
Yeah, I'm starting to think maybe I didn't hear it from you because you can't even get a sentence out.
Wow.
Fully.
Wow. Oh, you know what? It just dawned on me that this comes out for everybody tomorrow, but then next week we'll have... Anyway, happy July 4th, everybody, a little bit early.
That's true.
Right, because it's going to... Oh. I'm so excited I hit the mic.
Wow.
July 4th is going to happen before we do our next episode. So for everybody...
You would be correct.
Yes. So I'm assuming...
What she's trying to say, everyone, have a wonderful 4th of July with your family and friends, and try to keep all of your digits.
Yes, and happy America 250 too, by the way.
If you go into the 4th of July weekend with 10 fingers, try to come out with 10 fingers.
Yes, please.
Well, with that said, our sources are in our show notes.
Like they always are, yes.
Correct?
Yes.
And we'll see all of you again next week for another episode of Where Our Minds Wander.
See you soon. Thank you for joining us. We look forward to traveling with you again to the places where our minds wander.
If you like what you heard, please take a moment and provide us with a 5-star rating and a comment on your favorite listening platform. It really helps us move up the list and become more visible on the podcast charts so new people can find us.
And thank you all for your continued support.
See you next week for an all-new episode.